It's time to show you the ARP 2600 Thriller patch on the Thriller 2600. This was the one that I brought to the session. It's an ARP Tonus model, as you can see by this logo here. It's a little bit different than the treble clef logo. And the difference is that it has like the Moog ladder filter in it. So it kind of has a Moogish kind of sound, but a lot of the character of the 2600 too, and a lot of the patch capability of the 2600. So to break this sound down as simply as possible, I'm going to just show you one step at a time, starting with a sawtooth wave from oscillator 3, sawtooth output to the filter, raise up the level, then to hear it, a little bit of envelope generator controlling the filter, somewhere around there, and then the shape of the envelope generator is going to be no attack time, about halfway up on the decay to somewhat of a sustain so that the sound holds a little bit, and then no release time. So when I pick up my finger, the sound will stop. And then I'm going to patch the output of the filter to the mixer so we can hear it. So at this point, we should be able to hear the sawtooth going into the filter at the shape of the envelope generator. So we're not quite there yet. Now, to give the sound a little bit of character, we add some resonance. Not a lot, but just enough to give it some personality. Then this is where it gets a little bit more unique to what the 2600 can deliver. I bring in another oscillator that's in unison, so it's the same pitch, and it's going to be a pulse wave this time instead of a sawtooth. So I patch that in, and a pulse wave at about 50% duty cycle. So it's going to sound kind of like a square wave with a little resonance. But what makes it unique, you can't really do this on a lot of synths. I'm going to add pulse width modulation so that the pulse width sort of changes when I play the note. Like it's going to be that kind of an effect. But I'm going to make it happen at the same rate as the envelope generator that's controlling the filter. So now you can hear that. Here's without it. Kind of flat. With it, there's like an inner growl into the sound. So when I add oscillator 3 to that, I'm getting a little bit of richness, chorusing, phasing. And then another special thing that you can do on the ARP, since you can patch it, is take a sine wave from oscillator 2 and add it in the filter. So there's going to be some more fundamental frequency to give this sound a little more low end. And I'm just going to dial in a little bit. Oh, I see what's going on. The filter's tracking as I go up on the keyboard, so I'm going to shut that off by dead patching it. Now we're getting there. And let's try the line. Maybe a little brighter. So I'm just checking the final settings to make sure we're close. I think we sound pretty good. So let's check out the bass against the drums. Dante, you want to hit the Lindrum? So now I'd like to show you that sound on the Minimoog, what you can and can't match. So starting with the Minimoog, I'm going to do it the same way, a sawtooth waveform from oscillator 1, a pulse wave from oscillator 2, put them in unison, go into the filter, have the envelope generator controlling the filter, a little bit of resonance. We're just going to make some guesses here. Some decay time that goes to a sustained voltage, and then the VCA is going to be open. No keyboard tracking, so we should be pretty close right now. Pretty close. A little bright. So you see right away when I play the Minimoog is a single trigger instrument, which means if I hold a note and play another note, it's not going to trigger the envelope generators again. So on the ARP, I can play very like connected notes, and it'll go bow, 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 bow. But on the Minimoog, if I don't go, and I can smooth that out, but it still kind of misses some notes here and there. And on the ARP, since it's multiple trigger, you don't have to worry about that. So that's one of the advantages. And then also, I can't get any pulse width modulation on oscillator 2, and I can't get another sine wave from oscillator 2 without bringing a third oscillator in, and then you get too much chorusing. So these are the reasons why the ARP 2600 is really the best option. And the personality of the ARP is a little bit different than the Moog. They do have pretty much the same filter, but the VCA and the oscillators have different characteristics. So, you know, we use the ARP 2600, but you can get away with using the Minimoog too if you put it in the track. Just for fun, let's make the thriller bass sound on the Arturia ARP 2600 and see what we can come up with. So the Arturia ARP 2600 has all the routing potential that the real life ARP 2600 has. So we should be able to get pretty close, but there will be a few things that are not exactly the same, like the filter isn't the same. There's a Moog ladder filter in the original ARP 2600. And then in the later models of the real life ARP 2600, that got removed, so you won't even be able to get that on a later model one. The model I used is I think it's version 2. It's a Tonus. It has a different logo on it, not the treble clef logo. And that has its own unique sound. But we can make this sound on a lot of different synths if you have the ability to have pulse width modulation, a sine wave, you know, from one of the two audio oscillators, and a multiple triggering keyboard. Then you're good to go. So let's give it a try. So I'm going to bring a sawtooth in from oscillator 3 into the filter, and we can hear it. I'll raise the filter. And there's a bit of resonance there. You can see the resonance right here. Now I'm going to modulate the filter with an envelope generator instead of manually. So I'm going to have a good amount of modulation right there. I just raised that fader up. With the decay time about there, so it's going to decay for a little bit, and then it's going to decay to like this sustained voltage. So when you hold a key down, you'll hear it. Well, let me do it one at a time. That's going to decay to no sustained voltage. Now I'll bring the sustained voltage up. So you see how we get there? And that decay time is longer than the thriller bass part. So that means when you're playing the bass part, you never get the full decay when you're actually playing the part. But when you hold long notes, you get the full decay of the sound. So that was intentional, and it kind of gives you some expression on the keyboard because there's no like velocity or aftertouch on an ARP 2600 out of the box anyway, especially the old ones. So that's not far off, but still a long way to go. Oscillator 2 helps us a lot because we have a pulse wave that has the ability to be modulated, so we can get pulse width modulation. So I'm going to take a chord from the ADSR envelope generator into the pulse width modulation input, raise this fader so that we hear some pulse width modulation, and I'll drop oscillator 3 out so you can hear the difference of the pulse width and then no pulse width modulation. No pulse width modulation. Kind of sounds like a house bass or something, you know, straight square wave. And then you bring in modulation and you hear that growl. That's a lot of it. So I think it lived around there. Yeah. So it's more like a Fender bass. There's like this inner growl in the sound, and the harmonics kind of move, so it's changing from a square wave through the pulse wave shapes as the sound is playing. So it's like a moving sound. It's not just static, and that's an important thing. And then I'm going to take a patch cord from the same oscillator, and this is key too, and add some fundamental by adding sine wave to it. You hear that? Let me go to a higher note. You can hear it better. You hear that? Woo. So about there. Without it, it's a little thinner and subtle. But on big speakers, you hear it. So that helps because I'm not using a third oscillator to get that sine wave. So I don't have as much phasing. On a Minimoog, you could do it, but you need to use a third oscillator. So let me bring oscillator 3 back in. So now we have a sawtooth from oscillator 3, a pulse wave from oscillator 2, and a sine wave from oscillator 2 as well, giving us some fundamental. And we have the right keyboard configuration, so it's multiple triggering keyboard, so I can play very smoothly connected notes, like legato notes. And on a Minimoog, if you do that, then the sound won't fire, so that'll be a problem. Any other multiple triggering keyboard, you'll be fine. So let's see where we are with the sound. So right away, I think we have to adjust this a little bit, the decay time, and get this guy a little bit closer. That's better. So I think we're pretty close. Now I'm going to go listen to the recording. I don't think I can have that on this video, and then I'll be right back and I'll just tell you what I dialed in to get it as close as I can get it on a virtual Arturia ARP 2600. So I changed very little, slight changes to the decay time, and you can see, like, if you press this down at the very left bottom, right where the sequencer is, it says decay envelope 401.2. So all I was doing was like just one increment, you know, and it doesn't move in like tenths, it moves in big chunks. That's just how the software does. But I was barely moving this stuff, and so the slightest changes to the resonance and to the filter contour, like the modulation amount of the ADSR and the VCF, those slight variations, and then slight variation here at the pulse width modulation. And you have to be sure that you have pretty much of a square wave here. And then you can mess around a little bit with just the volume levels here in the mixer. But it doesn't take much, and then the sound gets much closer. And then the long notes. And you get a nice bass. You know, and then articulating the sound's important. The way Greg Phillinganes played it, it wasn't just like... It wasn't just like ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. You know, he articulates it. So it's long, 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 short. And if you try it on a Minimoog, you'll get, like, if you try to be like too connected, some notes won't fire. So make sure you have a multiple triggering keyboard. And those are all the things I could think of. So we'll send you this patch, and you can try it out on your virtual instrument and take a look at this patch panel, because it kind of clues you in for what you would do pretty much on any synth. So good luck. You can make it on try to make it on anything if you're interested in the sound. You know, a Prophet, see what's going on there, what you can and can't do, and also a Jupiter 8 or anything, whatever you might have, or even other virtual instruments. So it's all fun. And you can see the subtle differences, you know, really make the difference between, you know, the authentic sound and the getting close sound. They're all good. You know, that sound is just what went down that day, and it happened to be in the right song, you know, with the right artist and the right, you know, with Greg playing it. And Rod Temperton, that's his bass part for the record. You know, he came up with that. He came up with all of the the parts, especially on the song Thriller, like it all just came out of his head. And then you add that to Michael, like the vocal parts, you know, between Rod and Michael, they figured out all the vocal parts, and they knew exactly what they wanted and how everything would fit. And that's a big part of why this is a cool bass sound too, because it's like, it's not just the sound, it's like where it is, what track it's in, and the space that it clears for it. So, you know, keep that all in mind, and when you're making your own bass sounds, hopefully that helps, you know, getting your arrangement right, and clearing space for, you know, for the other things to kind of play off the bass.